Police officers, have you ever had to arrest family? While doing my nightly patrol, I noticed a black Hyundai swerving in the highway doing 95 miles per hour. When I finally got the driver to pull over and step out of the vehicle, my jaw dropped. It was my wife, drunker than an Irishman, staring right at me. But instead of looking guilty or ashamed, she lunged at me. "You cheater!" she yelled, clawing her nails at my face. I tried to restrain her, but she just kept hitting me and trying to gauge my eyes until I had no choice but to handcuff her by force. I placed her into the back seat and took off for the police station. The whole ride there, she kept saying our marriage was over and refused to elaborate why she thought I cheated. My heart genuinely broke bringing her in. I thought she was having another psychotic break. But then, she saw a picture of my coworker Dana's face on the wall and started yelling, "That's her! That's the one you're sleeping with!" I was genuinely confused. Me and Dana sometimes patrolled together, but that was it. I stayed in that station talking to my wife for hours, trying to plead that I never cheated. But she wouldn't listen to a word I said. I was eventually forced to just leave her in the cell and head home. When I came back in the morning, my wife was still there. And that's when I saw Dana in the break room. She rushed to me immediately. "Oh my God, are you okay? Your wife is so crazy for saying all of that about us. Is there anything I can do to help?" I told her yes, there was. I took her to my wife and asked Dana to explain that we never slept together. "You're both lying. I found your lipstick in his patrol car." My wife slurred at Dana, who was stepping back looking genuinely scared. And before anyone else could get a word in, my wife's parents arrived at the station. Her father jabbed his finger into my chest. "You piece of garbage! How dare you arrest your own wife?" Her mother was right behind him, tears streaming down her face. "How dare you sleep with your co-worker?" The whole station was now watching. The chief even stepped out, and I had to convince him I was handling this. That's when Dana stepped forward. She was usually a hothead in confrontation, but her hands were up peacefully for some reason. "Sir and ma'am, there's been a huge misunderstanding. Your son-in-law and I are just colleagues." My father-in-law whipped around to face her. "We know all about you. Late-night shifts, text messages. Jennifer showed us everything." I grabbed my mother-in-law's arm. "What text messages?" I've never texted Dana outside of work schedules. My wife suddenly gripped the bars. "January 15th, February 3rd, March 22nd, all dates you were texting. Should I keep going?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling frantically through my messages, but I found nothing. "I don't know what you're talking about." Dana touched my shoulder gently. "This is so confusing for you. Maybe someone spoofed your number." My father-in-law got in my face. "Get her out of that cell now. We're taking her home." I told him politely that doing this in the police station wasn't the brightest move. His face went red. That's when the desk sergeant intervened. "Sir, she blew a .19. Your daughter is facing DUI charges. Bail hearing isn't until noon." "Then we'll wait," her mother spat. "And our lawyer will be hearing about this false imprisonment." Dana pulled me aside while they went to sit with my wife. "Listen, I think you should go home. Check on your son. This is getting really ugly and you look exhausted." She was right. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I walked through the door, Ethan was sitting on the couch, still in his pajamas even though it was almost 10 a.m. "Dad?" His voice was small. "What happened?" Mom was crying. "Is she okay?" I sat down next to him, trying to find the right words. "Mom made a mistake driving when she shouldn't have. She's safe, just upset." "She kept talking about Dana on the phone with Grandma," Ethan said. My blood went cold. "You know Miss Dana?" He nodded. "Yeah, she brought us cookies once when you were working overtime. Mom got really mad after she left." I felt my stomach drop. "When was this? Like 2 months ago, maybe?" "Mom threw the cookies in the trash and kept crying." I stood up, pacing now. "Did Dana say anything to Mom?" "I don't know. They talked at the door for a while. Mom looked really upset after." None of this made sense. I checked my patrol car while Ethan watched TV. Sure enough, under the passenger seat, a tube of lipstick. But I'd never seen Dana wear lipstick. Not once in 3 years. Back inside, my phone buzzed with a text from Dana. "Your wife made bail. Her parents paid. I tried to calm things down for you, but she wouldn't listen. They're going to the house right now. I'm so sorry this is happening to you." I texted back asking her why she never told me she came to my house. Suddenly, I got no response. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, she texted back, "I just wanted to drop off shift schedules." I didn't know it would upset her. My stomach dropped. We'd been getting schedules digitally for 2 years. Before I could even fully process what this truly meant, my wife and her parents were at the door. I heard the car doors slam, and my hands started shaking as I walked to the front door. Through the peephole, I could see Jennifer standing there with her parents flanking her like bodyguards. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, and her hair was still messy from the jail cell. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Jennifer immediately pushed past me into the house without saying a word. Her father jabbed his finger into my chest hard enough to hurt. "You're going to explain everything right now," he growled. I stepped back, trying to keep things calm for Ethan, who was still on the couch. Jennifer saw him and rushed over, dropping to her knees and pulling him into a tight hug. Ethan wrapped his arms around her neck and started crying. "Mommy!" She held him close and looked at me over his head with pure hate in her eyes. I told Ethan he should go to his room and watch cartoons, but he clung to Jennifer harder. "I'm scared," he whimpered into her shoulder. My mother-in-law stepped forward and started counting on her fingers. She listed the text messages, the lipstick in my car, Dana coming to our house with cookies. I tried to explain that I never sent any texts and didn't know about the lipstick. They wouldn't let me finish a single sentence. Jennifer's dad kept interrupting, and her mom was shaking her head like she didn't believe anything I said. Jennifer stood up, still holding Ethan, and pulled out her phone with her free hand. She scrolled through it and then shoved the screen in my face. There were screenshots of text messages that looked like they came from my number to Dana. The messages were flirty and talked about meeting up after work. One said I couldn't wait to see her again, and another mentioned how beautiful she looked. My stomach dropped because I knew I never wrote any of those messages. I grabbed my own phone and pulled up my text history with Dana. There was nothing there except work schedule stuff from months ago. Jennifer saw my screen and screamed that I obviously deleted them to cover my tracks. Her dad said he was going to call the phone company himself to get the real records. The whole time, Ethan was crying harder and burying his face in Jennifer's shoulder. My mother-in-law kept saying she knew something was wrong when I started working late shifts. Jennifer suddenly grabbed a glass from the coffee table and threw it at the wall. It shattered into pieces and Ethan started screaming. I realized this was getting completely out of control and our son was going to be traumatized. I told them I would stay somewhere else tonight to give everyone space to calm down. Jennifer said if I walked out that door, I was admitting I was guilty. Her parents agreed and said leaving would prove I was a cheater. But I could see Ethan shaking and crying, and knew at least one of us needed to think clearly. I went to the bedroom and grabbed a bag, throwing in some clothes and my phone charger. Jennifer followed me, yelling that I was destroying our family for some woman at work. I told her again that nothing happened with Dana, but she wouldn't listen. Her dad stood in the doorway trying to block me from leaving. I had to squeeze past him while he called me every name he could think of. As I got to my car, Jennifer screamed from the porch that our marriage was over. I drove away with my hands shaking on the wheel, not even sure where I was going. I pulled into a parking lot and called Dexter Harris, our union rep at the department. He answered on the third ring, and I explained everything that had happened. He told me to document absolutely everything, and not to talk to anyone at work about this. He said the department would probably put me on desk duty once they heard about the arrest. He also said I should write down every interaction I'd had with Dana recently. I thanked him and drove around for another 20 minutes trying to think. Finally, I pulled into a cheap motel off the highway and got a room for the night. The room smelled like old cigarettes, and the bed creaked when I sat down. I pulled out a notebook from my bag and started writing everything I could remember. I wrote about how Dana always touched my shoulder when she talked to me, how she knew about the arrest before anyone else told her, how she showed up at the station right when Jennifer's parents arrived, the way she volunteered for every overtime shift when I was working, how she always sat next to me during briefings even when other seats were open. I remembered she brought coffee to my car once without me asking. She laughed at all my dumb jokes even when they weren't funny. I wrote until my hand cramped up and I had 3 pages of notes. Looking at it all written down made me feel sick to my stomach. How had I not seen this pattern before now? I kept writing about the cookie incident Ethan had mentioned. Dana had never said anything about going to my house. She acted like she barely knew where I lived. But she'd been there talking to Jennifer for 12 whole minutes according to what I remembered. And now she'd lied about bringing paper schedules when we'd been using digital ones forever. My phone buzzed with texts from Jennifer calling me names and saying she wanted a divorce. I didn't respond because I knew anything I said would make things worse right now. The next morning my phone rang while I was still in that crappy motel bed, and it was Dexter calling to tell me the department wanted me on modified duty starting immediately. He said the chief was worried about liability if I was out on patrol while distracted by all this personal stuff. It made sense, but still hurt knowing I couldn't do my regular job. Dexter told me to come to his office at 10, so we could figure out how to protect my job and my reputation from whatever was really going on here. When I got there, he had a whole legal pad full of notes and started laying out his plan step by step. First thing was getting my phone records from the carrier to prove I never sent those texts Jennifer kept talking about. He made the call right there in front of me and put in the official request saying we needed them for a department investigation. Then he pulled out his calendar and scheduled me for an internal affairs interview in 2 days, which made my stomach drop. He spent the next hour coaching me on what to expect and kept saying to stick to facts only and not guess about why Dana might have done any of this. That evening after leaving his office, I couldn't help myself and drove by my house just to see if things had calmed down. Jennifer's parents' car was still in the driveway and all the lights were on inside, which meant they were probably all still there talking about what a terrible person I was. I pulled out my phone and texted Jennifer, asking if I could at least call Ethan to say goodnight since I hadn't seen him in over a day. She didn't answer for 3 whole hours, and when she finally did, it was just 2 words saying he was asleep. I looked at the time, and it was only 7 at night, so I knew she was lying, but calling her out on it would just make everything worse. Back at the motel, I grabbed my notebook again and started making a detailed timeline of every single time I'd worked with Dana over the past few months. I wrote down how she always volunteered for overtime shifts when she knew I was working them too. She always sat right next to me during briefings, even when there were plenty of other empty chairs around the room. She brought me coffee to my patrol car at least once a week without me ever asking for it. She knew my favorite sandwich from the deli down the street and would grab one for me sometimes. Looking at all these little things written down made a pattern, so clear that I felt stupid for not seeing it before. The next day I had to go to the station to fill out paperwork for my modified duty status, and the whole place felt different. People I'd worked with for years wouldn't look me in the eye when I walked past them in the hallway. The desk sergeant who usually joked around with me just nodded and handed me the forms without saying anything. Word had clearly spread about Jennifer's arrest and her accusations about me and Dana. 2 days later, I sat in the internal affairs interview room across from Joshua McClain, who I'd only met once before at a department barbecue. He asked me question after question about my working relationship with Dana and whether we'd ever crossed professional boundaries. I explained we were just patrol partners who worked well together, but he kept coming back to why she would come to my house with cookies. He pulled out a folder and showed me the same screenshots Jennifer had shown me of those text messages with my name on them. I told him again that I never sent them and asked if they could check Dana's phone for any apps that could fake phone numbers. McClain wrote everything down, but his face stayed blank, so I couldn't tell if he believed me or thought I was lying. After 2 hours of questions, I was walking out when I suddenly remembered what Ethan had said about Jennifer and Dana talking at the door for a long time. I pulled out my phone right there in the parking lot and called Dexter saying we needed to find out exactly what Dana had said to my wife that day at our house. Dexter called me back within 10 minutes and said we should check if any neighbors had doorbell cameras from when Dana came by with those cookies. It was worth a shot, even though 2 months was a long time for someone to keep footage. I drove straight back to my neighborhood and started knocking on doors. The first 2 neighbors either didn't have cameras or had already deleted old recordings. The third house belonged to Mr. Peterson, who worked in IT and kept everything backed up to the cloud. He invited me in, and we sat at his computer while he scrolled through archived footage from February. After about 20 minutes of searching, he found it. There was Dana at my front door holding a container of cookies. The timestamp showed she stood there for 12 whole minutes, which made no sense for just dropping something off. Mr. Peterson kept clicking through more clips and found another one showing someone leaning into my patrol car parked in the driveway. The person's face wasn't visible, but they were definitely messing with something inside the car. I asked him to send me both clips immediately and thanked him about 50 times. My hands were shaking as I forwarded everything to Dexter with a message explaining what we'd found. He texted back saying this was exactly what we needed, and he was sending it straight to Internal Affairs with a formal request to investigate Dana. For the first time since this mess started, I felt like someone might actually believe me. That night around 9, my phone rang and it was Jennifer's father. He started yelling before I could even say hello. He said if I didn't drop all this nonsense about Dana and let Jennifer come home, he would go to every news station in town. He called me a dirty cop who arrested his own wife to cover up an affair. I put him on speaker and started recording like Dexter had told me to do. Jennifer's dad kept going for 10 minutes straight, making threat after threat. When he finally hung up, I saved the recording and sent it to Dexter. The next morning, I got a call from the station saying Internal Affairs wanted to see me immediately. When I got there, Joshua McClain told me they'd called Dana in for questioning based on the footage I'd provided. They also needed to do a full forensic sweep of my patrol car, which meant I had to turn it in right away. Without a patrol car, I couldn't even do desk duty, so I was basically suspended without being officially suspended. McClain said it would take at least a week to process everything. I left the station feeling lost and called Dexter, who said I should hire a family lawyer immediately. He recommended Veronica Harris, who specialized in custody cases involving law enforcement. I met with her that afternoon at her office downtown. She looked through all my documentation and said Jennifer's emotional state and false accusations actually gave us grounds to request supervised visitation. The thought of needing supervision to see my own son made me feel sick, but Veronica said it was the only way to guarantee I could see Ethan regularly. She started preparing the paperwork right there in her office. We filed everything with the court the next day, asking for supervised visits twice a week. Veronica argued that Jennifer's drinking and unstable behavior made her unpredictable around Ethan. The court clerk said we'd get a hearing date within 2 weeks. 3 days later, McClain called saying the forensics team had finished with my patrol car. They found the lipstick tube had no clear fingerprints, just some smudged partials that could belong to anyone. But they did find traces of a perfume on it that didn't match any products Jennifer owned. I asked how they knew what perfume Jennifer used, and McClain said they'd gotten a warrant to test items from our house. This whole thing was getting more invasive by the day. The best news came a week later when the phone company records finally arrived. Dexter called me practically shouting with excitement. The records proved no texts were ever sent from my number to Dana's on any of the dates Jennifer had claimed. Someone had definitely faked those messages, which meant someone was deliberately trying to destroy my marriage. Dexter said this was huge because it proved I was being set up. We now had concrete evidence that someone was lying, and it wasn't me. He immediately filed copies with Internal Affairs and sent them to Veronica for the custody case. Jennifer's lawyer tried to block the evidence, saying it was obtained improperly, but the judge allowed it. Things were finally starting to turn in my favor. The doorbell footage, the fake texts, and the planted lipstick all pointed to someone trying to frame me. Dana was still working, but had been moved to a different shift pending the investigation. I heard from other officers that she was telling everyone I was crazy and trying to blame her for my marital problems. But the evidence was speaking louder than her words. Internal Affairs expanded their investigation and started looking into Dana's work history and any other complaints. Veronica said all this evidence would help in family court because it showed I was the victim, not the cheater. She was building a strong case for why I deserved equal custody once everything was resolved. For now, though, I just wanted to see my son. The supervised visitation hearing was set for the following Monday, and I spent the whole weekend preparing what I wanted to say. Monday morning, I walked into the courthouse wearing my best suit and trying to keep my hands steady. The judge looked over the paperwork while Jennifer sat with her parents on the other side of the room. The hearing took less than 20 minutes, with the judge granting me supervised visits twice a week at the community center. Jennifer's lawyer stood up and handed the judge another stack of papers. He was filing for an emergency protective order, claiming I was harassing Jennifer by investigating her claims about Dana. Veronica jumped up immediately and showed the judge all our evidence, including the phone records proving those texts were fake. The judge read through everything and denied the protective order, saying I had every right to defend myself against false accusations. Jennifer's parents whispered angrily to their lawyer while we left the courtroom. 2 days later, we all met for mediation in a small conference room at the courthouse. The mediator tried to get Jennifer to speak, but her father kept interrupting and answering for her. Her mother would grab Jennifer's arm every time she started to say something on her own. The mediator stopped the session after 40 minutes and wrote in her notes that Jennifer seemed unable to speak freely with her parents present. She recommended Jennifer attend individual counseling without family members. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Dana saying she was sorry about everything and hoped we could talk soon. I showed it to Dexter immediately, and he told me to block her number right away, but save the message as evidence first. I screenshot everything and sent it to him before blocking her. The next morning, McLean called to update me on the investigation. Internal Affairs had interviewed Dana, and she denied any romantic interest in me, claiming she was just being friendly to a colleague. McLean said her story had major problems, though, because she kept changing details about why she came to my house. Friday finally came, and I drove to the community center for my first supervised visit with Ethan. The supervisor led me to a bright room with toys and books where I waited nervously. When the door opened, Ethan ran straight into my arms, crying and asking when I was coming home. My chest felt tight as I told him I didn't know yet, but that I loved him so much. We sat on the floor playing with Legos, while the supervisor took notes in the corner. Ethan mentioned that Mom had been crying a lot lately, and Grandma kept saying mean things about me. He said Grandma called me a bad man, and told him I didn't love them anymore. I wrote this down in my notebook, but didn't ask him more questions because I didn't want to upset him. We spent the rest of our 2 hours building a huge Lego castle and reading his favorite books. When time was up, Ethan clung to me, begging me not to leave. The supervisor had to gently pull him away while he cried for me. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes trying to pull myself together before driving home. McLean called me that evening with huge news about Dana. He'd discovered she accessed the evidence room and printed old paper schedules 3 days before she visited my house with cookies. The computer logs showed she printed schedules from 6 months ago, which completely destroyed her claim about dropping off current schedules. This was solid proof she had planned something and lied about it. Monday morning, the chief called me into his office personally. He sat behind his desk looking tired and said this whole situation was becoming a major problem for the department. He promised to be fair, but warned that if Dana had done something wrong, there would be consequences for everyone involved, including possible policy changes. He said the department's reputation was at stake and the city council was asking questions. I left his office feeling even more stressed than before. Wednesday was Jennifer's DUI arraignment at the courthouse. She stood before the judge while her lawyer tried to blame the arrest on our marital problems, saying she was emotionally distressed. The judge wasn't buying it, though, and pointed out that a blood alcohol of 0.19 was extremely dangerous, regardless of personal problems. He ordered Jennifer to complete an alcohol assessment and attend treatment as part of her plea deal. Her lawyer kept arguing, but the judge cut him off, saying drunk driving endangered innocent people no matter what was happening at home. Jennifer looked small and defeated as they let her out. That afternoon, I had my first appointment with a therapist that Veronica recommended. I sat in her office feeling weird about talking to a stranger, but after an hour, I felt lighter somehow. She helped me see that I wasn't going crazy, and that someone really had tried to destroy my marriage and career on purpose. She said the evidence clearly showed manipulation and deception. That wasn't my fault. We talked about how Dana's actions were calculated and deliberate, not just misunderstandings. She gave me techniques for handling the stress and dealing with the uncertainty of not knowing why Dana did this. I left feeling more clear-headed than I had in weeks. The investigation was moving forward, and the truth was slowly coming out, even though it was destroying everything I'd built. 3 days later, my neighbor knocked on my door holding his laptop and looking worried. He opened it to show me another doorbell clip from the morning Jennifer got arrested, and there was a white Honda Civic parked outside our house at 6 in the morning, 2 hours before Dana's shift even started. I zoomed in on the license plate, and my hands started shaking because I recognized those numbers from the parking lot at work. The timestamp showed she sat there for 20 minutes just watching our house before driving away. I thanked him and immediately called Dexter, who told me to document everything and file a formal complaint with the department right away. I spent the next 2 hours writing up every single thing Dana had done, from the lies about schedules to showing up at my house to the fake text messages Jennifer saw. Dexter reviewed it and helped me add specific policy violations before we submitted it to Internal Affairs with all the evidence attached. The union president called me personally to say they were backing me completely and would provide legal support if needed. McLean from Internal Affairs called me the next morning with more bad news about Dana. They'd been digging through computer logs and found she'd accessed the patrol car assignment system 17 times in the past 6 months, always making sure she'd be partnered with me. She also pulled my personnel file back in January, which she had no reason to access since she wasn't a supervisor. He said they were building a case for stalking and harassment that went way beyond just workplace misconduct. That afternoon, Jennifer's mother called me crying so hard I could barely understand her. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying over and over. I asked her what happened, and she said she'd been looking at all the evidence I'd sent through my lawyer, the phone records showing no texts, the doorbell footage of Dana lurking around, all the lies Dana told. She said she just wanted what was best for Ethan, and maybe they'd been wrong about everything. I told her to really think about what was true here, because our son needed both his parents thinking clearly. She cried harder and said Jennifer was drinking again and wouldn't listen to anyone. 2 nights later, my phone rang at 1 in the morning, and it was Jennifer, drunk and slurring her words. She went back and forth between screaming at me and crying, saying she didn't know what was real anymore. Then she said something that made me sit up straight. Dana showed me messages on her phone, but I was already drunk and maybe I couldn't see right. I asked her to repeat that, and she said Dana had come to the house that day with a phone showing messages, but Jennifer had already been drinking since noon. She said the phone looked like mine, but now she wasn't sure about anything. I recorded the call on my laptop while she rambled about being confused and not knowing who to trust. The next week we had our first family court hearing, and the judge set up a temporary separation agreement. I got Ethan Friday night through Sunday evening, which wasn't nearly enough, but my lawyer said it was standard and better than nothing. At least it gave Ethan some stability and routine, which he desperately needed after all this chaos. The judge ordered both of us to focus on Ethan's well-being above everything else. 2 days later, Ethan's school counselor called both of us into a meeting about his falling grades and anxiety. He was having trouble sleeping and crying at random times during class. Jennifer and I sat on opposite sides of the room, but we both agreed to work together just for school stuff. We set up a plan for extra support and counseling at the school, and for once we didn't fight about anything. The counselor said Ethan needed to see stability between us, even if we were separated. That Thursday, I was leaving my therapy appointment when Dana appeared in the parking lot walking straight toward me. Before she could say anything, Dexter came out of nowhere and stepped between us. "You need to leave right now," he said to her. She looked shocked and backed up quickly, practically running to her car. Dexter had been following me for protection after the union heard she might try to contact me. He said she'd been waiting there for an hour, according to the security guard. McLean called me that evening with huge news about Dana's phone. They'd found metadata showing she had an app called Text Now that let you send messages from fake numbers. She deleted it the day after Jennifer's arrest, but they were working with the company to recover the data. He said this was the smoking gun they needed to prove she faked those messages Jennifer saw. It would take a few weeks, but he was confident they'd get the evidence. I spent the weekend putting together a packet of everything we had so far. The phone records proving I never texted Dana, both doorbell videos showing her at our house, the evidence that she lied about schedules, the computer logs of her accessing my files, the patrol car assignments she manipulated, and now the deleted messaging app. I organized it all chronologically with timestamps and explanations. Veronica looked it over and said it was overwhelming proof that I was being set up by someone who'd been planning this for months. Veronica scheduled the meeting for the following Tuesday at her office and told me to bring every single piece of evidence we had collected. I arrived early and helped her set up the conference room, arranging all the documents in order on the table while she tested the laptop to make sure the doorbell videos would play properly. Jennifer arrived with her parents 20 minutes late, and I could see she'd been crying again from her puffy red eyes and the tissues she kept clutching in her hand. Her father sat down across from me with his arms crossed, while her mother held Jennifer's hand and kept rubbing her back. Veronica started by showing the phone records first, pointing to each date Jennifer had mentioned, and proving no texts existed between me and Dana on those days, or any other days for that matter. Jennifer's father kept shaking his head, but I noticed her mother leaning forward to look closer at the papers. Then Veronica played the doorbell footage showing Dana at our house for 12 whole minutes, when she claimed she was just dropping off schedules we hadn't used paper copies for in 2 years. Jennifer's mother gasped and grabbed the papers showing when we switched to digital schedules, her hands shaking as she read the dates. The second video showed someone reaching into my patrol car that same day Dana visited, and even though the person's face wasn't visible, you could see them placing something under the passenger seat. Veronica then showed the forensics report about the lipstick having no clear fingerprints and containing a perfume Jennifer never used, plus the metadata evidence about Dana's deleted messaging app. Jennifer's mother started crying harder now, not angry tears but something else, and she kept looking between me and Jennifer like she was seeing everything differently. Her father still sat there with his jaw clenched, but even he couldn't argue with the patrol car assignment logs showing Dana had manipulated the system to be my partner over and over again. After 2 hours of going through everything, Jennifer finally spoke up and said she'd enter treatment if I stopped the investigation. But Veronica quickly explained that wasn't how it worked, since Internal Affairs was handling Dana's case separately from our family situation. Jennifer's mother suddenly stood up and walked around the table to where I was sitting, and I tensed up expecting her to hit me or scream. But instead she just touched my shoulder and said she was sorry for not believing me. Her father didn't apologize, but he did tell Jennifer they needed to focus on getting her help instead of fighting me, which was more than I expected from him, honestly. Jennifer agreed to enter an intensive outpatient program that would meet 3 times a week and promised to stop telling people I was cheating while the investigation continued. It wasn't an apology, and she still looked at me with suspicion, but at least it meant Ethan wouldn't have to hear his grandparents calling me names anymore. 3 days later, I got the call from McLean that Internal Affairs had finished their preliminary investigation and found no evidence of any inappropriate relationship between me and Dana, though they strongly recommended I be reassigned to day shift to avoid any future contact with her. I accepted immediately since I just wanted to get back to normal work and stop being the guy everyone whispered about in the hallways. That same afternoon, the chief called Dana into his office and gave her a formal reprimand, plus immediate reassignment to the North Precinct, pending the full investigation, and word spread through the station within an hour that she was basically done at our department. She cleaned out her locker while I was on patrol so we wouldn't cross paths, but guys told me later she didn't say goodbye to anyone and just walked out with a box of her stuff looking straight ahead. Jennifer started her treatment program the next Monday and actually seemed to be taking it seriously, showing up for every session and participating in the group discussions, according to what her counselor told me during our check-in call. About 2 weeks in, her therapist reached out asking if I'd be willing to do some joint sessions to work on co-parenting communication. And even though the last thing I wanted was to sit in a room with Jennifer after everything, I agreed because I knew Ethan needed us to at least be functional parents. During our third joint session with both therapists present, Jennifer finally admitted that Dana had come to the house that day and shown her messages on a phone, claiming I was harassing her and wouldn't leave her alone at work. Jennifer said she was already drunk by noon that day, and when she saw those messages with my name at the top, she just believed it immediately without thinking to check if the number matched mine. The therapist asked her to think about why she was so quick to believe it, and Jennifer started crying, saying she'd been feeling disconnected from me for months because of all my overtime shifts, and she was already worried I was pulling away from the family. I wanted to be angry, but honestly I just felt sad that she'd been struggling, and instead of talking to me about it, she'd turned to drinking, and then believed the first bad thing someone told her about me. Dexter called me that evening with an update that Dana would definitely face formal misconduct charges that could end her law enforcement career since the evidence of manipulation and false statements was too overwhelming for the department to ignore. He said the union wouldn't even defend her because she'd violated so many policies and ethical standards that they couldn't justify supporting her case. The next week, Jennifer had her court date for the DUI charge, and her lawyer worked out a deal where she'd plead to reckless driving instead of DUI in exchange for completing treatment and losing her license for 6 months. Veronica told me this was pretty typical for first offenses with good lawyers, and even though it felt unfair that she wouldn't face the full consequences, I decided not to fight it since it meant less stress for Ethan. We settled into a routine where I had Ethan every weekend and Wednesday nights, and while it killed me not to see him every day, at least the schedule was stable and he knew what to expect. His teacher called to say he was doing better in class, paying attention more and not crying randomly like before, though he still asked her sometimes when Mommy and Daddy would live together again. During one of our sessions, Jennifer's therapist suggested we go through Jennifer's phone together to look for evidence of the fake messages, and that's when we found it. There was a contact saved with my name, but when we clicked on it, the number was completely different from mine, off by just 2 digits so you wouldn't notice unless you really looked. Jennifer started shaking when she realized Dana must have created this contact during those 12 minutes at our door, then used it to send the fake messages that Jennifer saw when she was too drunk to notice the number didn't match. The discovery made Jennifer shake harder, and she grabbed my arm asking me to call her parents right away. I dialed her dad's number and handed her the phone, watching her explain everything we'd just found while tears ran down her face. Her parents showed up at our door 20 minutes later, and her dad looked at the evidence on Jennifer's phone, his face getting redder by the second. He turned to me and said they owed me an apology for the public scene at the station, but they were just trying to protect their daughter. I told him I understood, and that all that mattered now was helping Jennifer get better and keeping Ethan stable through this mess. Her mom hugged me for the first time in months and whispered that she was sorry for believing the worst about me. The next morning, Dexter called with news from Internal Affairs about their final decision on Dana. They sustained multiple policy violations, including evidence tampering, making false statements, harassment, and conduct unbecoming an officer. She wasn't getting fired, but they demoted her 2 ranks and transferred her to the records division, where she'd be filing paperwork instead of working patrol. Dexter said it wasn't the termination we hoped for, but at least she'd never work the streets again or have access to patrol cars and equipment. 3 days later, a letter arrived at the station from Dana addressed to the department taking responsibility for what she called poor judgment and unprofessional behavior. Veronica read it first and told me it was actually good that Dana didn't apologize to me directly, since it showed admission of wrongdoing that could help if we decided to pursue civil action later. The chief called me into his office that afternoon to tell me I'd be returning to regular patrol starting Monday with a new partner named Rodriguez, who transferred from the next county over. Rodriguez knew the whole story, but treated me like any other cop when we started working together, focusing on the job instead of the drama. Some of the other officers still whispered when I walked by, but most of them had seen the evidence and were supportive, especially after word spread about Dana's demotion. Jennifer and I met with both our lawyers the following week to formalize our separation agreement. We agreed on a trial separation for 6 months, with the option to either work toward reconciliation or proceed with divorce depending on how her treatment went and whether we could rebuild any trust. Jennifer was staying committed to her outpatient program and hadn't had a drink in 3 weeks, according to her therapist, who called me with updates. Our custody arrangement gave me every other weekend plus Wednesday nights with Ethan, and Jennifer got him the rest of the time, as long as she stayed sober and continued treatment. That Saturday, I picked up Ethan for our weekend and drove him to the park near the lake where we used to go when he was little. We bought a bag of bread from the corner store and spent 2 hours feeding the ducks and geese, not talking about anything serious, just enjoying being together. Ethan laughed when one brave duck ate right from his hand, and for the first time in months I saw him acting like a regular kid, instead of carrying the weight of our family problems. He asked if we could come back next weekend, and I promised we would, making a mental note to keep our time together simple and fun instead of trying to fix everything at once. On the drive home, Ethan fell asleep in the back seat, and I found myself thinking about everything that had happened with Dana over the past year. Looking back at all the little moments, the way she always volunteered for my shifts, how she'd touch my shoulder or arm when we talked, the excuses to be near me. It was clear she'd developed feelings that turned into something darker. I'd been too focused on doing my job to notice the warning signs and missed how her behavior was escalating from a crush into full manipulation and obsession. The whole experience taught me to pay more attention to workplace boundaries and trust my gut when something feels off instead of brushing it aside to avoid awkwardness. 2 months have passed since that night I arrested Jennifer, and our family looks nothing like it used to. We're not living together. Jennifer and I might never fully trust each other again, and Ethan still asks when things will go back to normal. But Jennifer's getting help for her drinking. I'm back at work without false accusations hanging over me. Dana can't hurt anyone else from her desk job, and most importantly, Ethan's safe and starting to smile again. The truth about Dana's manipulation finally came out, even though it took destroying our marriage to expose it. Sometimes that's the best ending you can hope for when someone decides to tear your life apart. Not a happy reunion, but at least everyone's surviving the wreckage and finding a way forward. That's how it went for me. Now I want to hear what you think. Drop a comment so we can keep the conversation going.